There's a pattern that shows up again and again, so quietly, so wrapped in good intentions that most women never see it coming. It doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like love. It looks like effort. It looks from the inside like devotion. But it has a name: over-attachment. And for women who genuinely want a man of substance, one who is loyal, emotionally present, financially grounded, it is the first and most invisible trap. It doesn't come from weakness. That's the thing people get wrong. It comes from wanting to matter to someone, from that very human need to feel like your presence makes a difference in another person's world. There's nothing wrong with that desire. But when a woman begins to measure her worth by how quickly he texts back, when she cancels her own plans the moment he calls, when she quietly reshapes her life around his availability, something shifts. Not in him, necessarily. In how she's perceived. And in how she begins to perceive herself. Behavioral psychologists have long understood that attraction isn't driven by proximity or compliance. It's governed by something far more primal: scarcity and autonomy. When access to someone is unlimited, the mind stops reaching for them. Not out of cruelty, out of wiring. A high-value man, one who has built something of his own, who lives inside a world of challenge and self-sufficiency, doesn't interpret constant availability as devotion. He interprets it as fragility. And fragility, however tender its origins, does not inspire the kind of deep-rooted loyalty a woman like this is actually looking for. Cleopatra understood this, not just instinctively, but strategically. Her power over Caesar, over Antony, was never built on constant presence or endless reassurance. It was built on selective visibility. On a persona so compelling, so deliberately unpredictable, that wanting more of her felt inevitable. She was desired precisely because she was not always there. Contrast that with a pattern so many modern women fall into, flooding someone with messages, gestures, affirmations, hoping that the sheer weight of their care will secure something lasting. What it often secures instead is fleeting attention, polite distance. A man who feels slightly suffocated but can't quite explain why. Kierkegaard, of all people, touched on this. So did a long line of thinkers after him. Authentic desire lives inside tension. It needs distance to breathe. It cannot survive in a space where everything is already given, already answered, already offered before the question is even asked. This doesn't mean a woman should become cold or strategic in some calculating, exhausting way. It means something simpler and more sustainable than that. Women in demanding careers, in creative worlds, in lives rich with their own ambitions and friendships, these women tend to attract a different quality of attention. Not because they play games, but because they're genuinely full. Their happiness isn't waiting on someone else's schedule, and that fullness is felt. It's magnetic in a way that availability simply isn't. The line between showing interest and showing need is narrow. Dangerously narrow, and yet it's one of the most consequential lines a woman can learn to recognize in herself. A man of real value isn't drawn to how quickly you respond. He's drawn to how compelling you are when you do. He's drawn to a woman who is centered, whose life has weight and direction that exists entirely apart from him, and who chooses to let him in, rather than orbiting around him, hoping to be let in herself. This is the law of scarcity at work, and it operates on everyone. When something is too easy to access, we stop valuing it. Not consciously, not unkindly, just inevitably. The rewards we pursue most intensely are the ones that ask something of us. Over-attachment removes that ask. It hands everything over before effort has been made, and in doing so, quietly drains the fascination it was trying to create. Avoiding it isn't about emotional withholding, it's about investment. In yourself, in your own plans, your own rhythms, your own life. It requires resisting the impulse to react to every signal of attention, to override your own routines for the possibility of his presence. It requires a kind of self-mastery that goes against a lot of what women are socialized to believe. That care should be boundless, that love should be constant, that making yourself available is the same as making yourself valuable. It isn't, and the women who understand that distinction carry themselves differently. They attract differently. The effects of ignoring this aren't abstract. They show up as patterns. Relationships that go nowhere, men who seem interested and then gradually withdraw, the exhausting cycle of giving more and receiving less. The trap of over-attachment hides behind the most genuine emotions. That's exactly what makes it so hard to see. But recognition is where everything changes. Not recognition in a harsh, self-critical way, in a clear-eyed one. Right alongside over-attachment, and just as difficult to identify, sits a second trap, where over-attachment shows itself through excess, through too much, too soon, too eagerly. This one disguises itself as something almost admirable. It wears the face of flexibility, of understanding, of being easygoing. It's the trap of low standards, and it may be even more seductive in its disguise, because the women caught in it are often the kindest, most generous ones in the room. Women are conditioned in ways both obvious and deeply subtle to adjust, to accommodate, to keep the peace. From early on, the message is woven in. Don't be too demanding, don't expect too much, be grateful for what you have. And some of that wisdom has its place. But applied to romantic relationships, particularly with men of high value, it becomes a slow and quiet form of self-erasure. When a woman tolerates inconsistency, excuses, emotional unavailability, or accepts treatment she privately knows falls short of what she deserves, she isn't being patient. She's signaling something. And men read those signals, often without even knowing they do. A man with ambition, with resources, with a life built on high expectations, is not drawn to a woman who will settle. He may enjoy the ease of it temporarily, but ease without substance rarely becomes devotion. Kant didn't write about dating, obviously, but his ideas about moral integrity and boundaries translate startlingly well here. Limits aren't signs of rigidity or coldness. They are expressions of self-knowledge. They communicate, I know what I'm worth. And that knowledge, projected clearly, is one of the most attractive things a woman can carry into a relationship. Eleanor Roosevelt is an interesting example to sit with here. Not a romantic figure in the conventional sense, but a woman whose refusal to compromise her principles created a kind of authority and magnetism that outlasted every relationship she navigated. The women who command real respect, historically, professionally, romantically, are rarely the ones who go along to get along. They're the ones who make clear, gracefully, and without apology, what they will and won't accept. The popular advice to go with the flow or not be so picky sounds harmless. Practical, even. But it produces the exact conditions that repel the kind of man a woman with standards is actually hoping to attract. When expectations are vague, when boundaries are flexible to the point of invisibility, when behavior that should be addressed is instead excused, a man of substance doesn't feel lucky. He feels unchallenged. And without challenge, without the sense that something of genuine value is at stake, his investment doesn't deepen. It coasts, or it walks. Men who have built things, wealth, careers, meaningful lives, are accustomed to operating in environments where excellence is the standard. They gravitate toward women who reflect that. Not because they want to be controlled or judged, but because they're wired to respect what doesn't easily bend. A woman who knows her non-negotiables, who states them calmly and holds them firmly, is not a burden to a high-value man. She is, often, exactly what he's been looking for. The practical piece of this isn't complicated, but it does require honesty. It means knowing, really knowing, not just theoretically, what behaviors are acceptable and which ones aren't, and then refusing to pretend otherwise. Every small concession, every time something genuinely hurtful is dismissed as not a big deal, sends a message. Over time, those messages accumulate into a narrative about what a woman believes she deserves. Men who are paying attention will read that narrative clearly. Research in behavioral psychology consistently confirms this. Men are more likely to invest deeply in relationships where expectations are transparent and effort is genuinely required. Challenge, paired with fairness, doesn't repel, it captivates. It transforms a relationship from convenient into meaningful. Low standards are a strategic error with real consequences. Not just emotional ones, though those are significant, but in the entire architecture of how a relationship forms and sustains itself. A woman who settles for less may hold a man's presence for a while, but rarely his respect, his loyalty, or his deepest investment. The women who refuse to compromise on what genuinely matters to them, who maintain their ambitions and their dignity, regardless of his immediate reaction, cultivate something harder to walk away from. A presence that is both magnetic and trustworthy. Once the first two traps are understood, a third one appears. And this one is particularly tricky because it arrives dressed as protection. It feels like foresight, like being proactive. It's the urge to control, to manage outcomes, to shape his choices, to engineer the relationship into something that feels safe. And of all the traps, this one may be the most understandable, because it usually appears in women who have been hurt, who've watched things fall apart before, who simply don't want that to happen again. The instinct makes complete sense. The outcome, unfortunately, does not. High-value men who are stable, committed, capable of genuine loyalty, value autonomy above almost everything else. Not because they want to avoid accountability, but because self-direction is integral to how they've built their lives. When a woman begins to monitor, question, direct, or subtly maneuver his choices, even with the best intentions, something shifts in the dynamic. What was mutual starts to feel unequal. What was chosen starts to feel obligated. An obligation, in matters of the heart, is the beginning of the end of desire. Machiavelli is an unlikely relationship counselor, but his core insight holds. True power is exercised through restraint, not imposition. The women who hold the most influence in relationships, historically, socially, romantically, are rarely the ones gripping tightest. They're the ones who hold their own world so fully, so compellingly, that being part of it feels like an honor rather than a default. There's a meaningful distinction here between behavioral control and emotional control, and both are worth examining. Behavioral control is more obvious, tracking where he goes, questioning decisions, requiring constant updates. But emotional control is subtler, and in some ways more corrosive, engineering his moods, orchestrating his expressions of affection, needing to feel like she is the architect of how he feels about her. Men with high emotional intelligence detect this incongruence, even when they can't name it. It registers as anxiety, as insecurity wearing the costume of care. The philosophical truth underneath all of this is simple. Authentic engagement cannot be manufactured. The moment a woman begins trying to control outcomes, she is no longer offering a relationship. She is managing one. And managed relationships, however stable they appear, rarely produce the kind of deep, voluntary devotion she actually wants. Cleopatra, once more, illustrates this clearly. Her influence over powerful men was never built through micromanagement. It was built through sovereignty, through an inner life so rich and self-contained that her presence became something men oriented themselves toward, rather than something she had to push them toward. Modern equivalents exist everywhere. Women in leadership, in creative fields, in relationships that last. They lead by example, by presence, by the quiet authority of someone who doesn't need to grip. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive. It means redirecting that energy inward, into building a life so full and compelling that a man's place in it is a privilege he actively maintains, rather than a position she has to constantly secure. Behavioral psychology is clear on this point. Effort that is freely chosen generates far deeper attachment than effort that is coerced or pressured. Voluntary investment is the only kind that lasts. Beyond control, there is something quieter but equally powerful at work in the dynamics of lasting attraction. Something that is almost never discussed with the seriousness it deserves, perhaps because it sounds counterintuitive in a culture that equates openness with intimacy. It's mystery, and the women who understand it, who truly embody it rather than perform it, hold a different kind of presence. Curiosity is not a trivial instinct. It is one of the most powerful drivers of human attention. When something is fully known, fully mapped, fully accessible, the mind stops reaching for it. Not always immediately, but inevitably. High-value men, particularly those who thrive on problem-solving, on challenge, on the satisfaction of earning something worth having, are especially responsive to women who retain a sense of depth that isn't immediately exhausted. Not because they want to feel confused, but because they want to feel engaged, drawn forward, like there is always something more worth discovering. This is what social psychologists call the curiosity gap, the space between what is known and what isn't yet. It creates anticipation. It sustains attention past the initial spark. It transforms attraction from a single moment into a sustained experience. Women who reveal everything early, every anxiety, every past hurt, every daily routine, every fear about the future, aren't being dishonest. They're often being genuinely authentic. But authenticity without discernment is not a virtue in early attraction. It's an accelerant that burns through intrigue before depth has had a chance to form. The brain adapts to familiarity quickly. Without the gentle tension of the unknown, emotional investment plateaus. Sometimes it simply stops. Mystery, practiced well, isn't withholding or distance or emotional unavailability. It's something more sophisticated than any of those things. It's a woman who is fully present, warm, engaged, genuinely interested, but whose inner life isn't all immediately visible. Who has passions and pursuits and dimensions that reveal themselves gradually over time in ways that keep the experience of knowing her genuinely layered. Every woman has that depth. Mystery is simply the choice not to offer all of it at once. The balance here is real and worth acknowledging. A woman who is purely enigmatic, who withholds warmth along with information, risks something different: alienation, not intrigue. The goal isn't to be unknowable, it's to be worth knowing over time. To be the kind of woman whose presence provokes not just admiration, but curiosity. The sense that there is always more, that the conversation never quite reaches the bottom. That being around her is consistently rewarding in ways that aren't entirely predictable. Practically, this looks like continuing to invest in a life outside the relationship. In friendships, in ambitions, in the private joys that have nothing to do with him. It looks like resisting the urge to fill every silence with disclosure, to answer every question completely before it's fully asked, to overshare in the hope that transparency will create closeness. Real closeness builds slowly in layers, and the women who understand that tend to inspire a particular kind of pursuit, not desperate, not frantic, but sustained, patient, genuinely invested. And then there's the final trap, the one that is, in many ways, the hardest to talk about. Because it will feel, at first, like a criticism of kindness itself. It isn't, but it requires a certain willingness to look honestly at something most women have been praised for their entire lives. Being too nice, not kind, not warm, not generous. Those are strengths, and they remain strengths. But niceness, indiscriminate, boundless, reflexive niceness, is something different. It is accommodation without agency, agreeability without a self underneath it. And in the specific dynamics of attracting a man of real value, it quietly dismantles the very magnetism it's trying to project. A woman who over-apologizes, who never disagrees, who contorts her schedule and her preferences and her genuine feelings to ensure that no one, least of all him, is ever uncomfortable in her presence, communicates something she almost certainly doesn't intend to. She communicates that her approval is free, that her attention doesn't cost anything, that there are no real stakes in losing her regard, because it isn't going anywhere, regardless of how she is treated. High-value men operate in worlds where discernment is currency, where not everything gets a yes, and where the things that do get a yes carry weight precisely because of all the things that don't.